What you have heard here today is evidence of a phenomenon. It sounds fantastic, and it is fantastic. We presented this evidence in the public interest of open government. Our signatures on affidavits in the press kit that you have attest to the truth of our statements. Our evidence is now public domain. The real question is, what is the public going to do with it, this testimony? It has been a general practice of the media to scoff at these kinds of stories, make light of such testimony. We can only ask that you take the time to give some serious consideration not only to our statements, but to the statements of other witnesses out there who have similar incidents. There is also documentary evidence that helps support what we have said. We hope you will take the time to at least take a look at those, research this a little bit, and if you do, I think you'll come to the same conclusions that we have. That is that the UFO phenomenon is real, not imaginary. There's current excessive secrecy in our government surrounding this phenomenon. Unknown aerial objects have in fact been observed over many of our nuclear weapons bases and other nuclear facilities, and in some cases the appearance of these objects coincided with compromising the operational readiness of our nuclear weapons. Although each of us might have different opinions about the meaning and intent of these incidents, I think we can all agree that the tampering with nuclear weapons is a national security concern. This is Air Force official policy on UFOs. This is dated 2005, but I believe it is current policy. I'll just read one part of it. It says, no UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force was ever an indication of threat to our national security. That is clearly misleading. It is false based on our testimonies. This statement, the decision to discontinue UFO investigations, was based on an evaluation report prepared by the University of Colorado in 1969. I believe this was the infamous Condon Committee study. There is substantial evidence to show that study was superficial and biased. In particular, the Echo and Oscar incidents I spoke about were never investigated by the Condon Committee, even though their principal investigator was well aware of these incidents. Obviously, the testimony given here today conflicts directly with that Air Force policy statement. We ask that our government answer to the public about the obvious discrepancy between our testimony and that of the current statement. Indeed, we demand an answer based on the foundation of our democracy that says, and I want to paraphrase Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, the people should be strong enough and well enough informed to maintain the sovereign control over its government. Finally, I want to say, I think I speak for every one of us here, I have the utmost respect for all the men and women in the U.S. Air Force. I graduated from the Air Force Academy. I thoroughly enjoyed being a part of the Air Force, and I was honored to serve my country in that way. Our disagreement and challenge to the Air Force has nothing to do with the people of the Air Force. It has to do with official Air Force policy. And I think they are deliberately withholding the facts, not just in what you've heard here, but continuously since 1969. And by doing so, they're not allowing the people of this country to engage in the decisions regarding events that are clearly national security issues and concern to all of us. We're simply asking for the truth. Thank you for your attention. At this time, we're going to take questions. Mr. Hastings will take it from here. If you would go to the microphone over here and tell us what media you represent. Thank you.
When you ask a question, I would ask first that you identify yourself and your organization, and then direct your question perhaps to a specific individual. That person will have to find his way to the mic, so there will be a bit of delay. Yes.
Pat McCune, the Daily Trojan, University of Southern California. We just did a big event here. And LucasArts, Mr. George Lucas himself. I wanted to commend all of you. You guys are soft-spoken, but you carry a big stick, and that's exactly the way to approach this issue. I remember when UFOs first got going, it was like a laughing matter until they started revealing themselves in the deserts, Arizona, Colorado, and so forth and so on. I'm standing up here not only because if I'm a resource to anybody, if LucasArts is, please let me know, and I'm glad to do whatever I can to help you. As well, I wanted to point out that my friend Charles Stone back here is something of a real authority on UFOs. It does quite extensive work on websites and all, and is a real authority if you need some questions answered. That's it.
Hello, Jeff Schogel with Stars and Stripes. Two quick questions. Mr. Hastings, you had mentioned that this is an ongoing phenomenon. Is there an incident later than 1980 that you are aware of? And then also, are there any testimonies here today that are new that have not yet been documented or been in the public domain?
This is a cross-section of the witnesses who've come forward. The latest incident involving nuclear missiles was at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 2007. However, the person is still active duty Air Force. I'm not going to elaborate on that until that person is separated from the Air Force. Another incident occurred at the Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada, Area 2 weapons storage area. A series of incidents, the latest being in April of 2003, in which there were unidentified aerial objects maneuvering near the weapons bunkers at that facility. More recently, civilian sighting reports in Orange County, California, at the Seal Beach Naval Weapons Station, a series of bunkers, again, containing nuclear weapons. There were local media reports of multiple sightings in March of 2009 near this weapons storage facility. This is ongoing. This is the tip of the iceberg. We can only catch as catch can. I am of the opinion that for every incident that I'm aware of, and for witnesses that we've got in hand, there could be 10, there could be 100, there could be many, many more incidents that I'll never know about because the people won't come forward. They'll wait years or decades to talk about what they know.
And is anything that has been said here not been in the public domain before?
I'm sorry?
Anything that has been said here, I know I've heard the incident that Mr. Holt referred to, I've seen Mr. Salas. Is there anything here?
The other people that you've heard here today, I reckon you have not heard about. The testimony of the majority of these people have not hit the national airwaves, so to speak, or the national media. There have been websites, I've written articles and so on, but the majority of these witnesses have not received national or international exposure. I think if we could maybe limit one question per person so we can get everybody accommodated. Yes.
Gentlemen, Stephen Smith, KSHE Radio, St. Louis. I commend you all for being here. What an incredible panel. And Robert, you and I have always spoken over the phone. I'm still editing the book. I was at Naval Headquarters in Communications during the Carter administration. And I can affirm what you're all saying. This phenomenon is incredibly real. And one day, a gentleman came into our comm station, came up to me, I had never seen him before in my life, and said, "Do you know that we have aliens on ice?" And I was just taken back and speechless. I didn't pursue with any questioning. And he turned around and walked away and walked out. I have been a contactee twice in my life, both times in Santa Monica, California, one in 1986, one in 1997. Incredible experiences that I won't go into detail right now. But I just want to say, bravo, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Spencer Ackerman with Wired. Mr. Hastings, could you elaborate on why you've speculated that the unidentified flying objects that all of you have described possess the agenda of trying to tell us to turn away from our path of use of nuclear weapons? Are there other potential explanations that you've considered and found less plausible? Is there a possible offensive threat to the world from these UFOs?
As I said in my introductory remarks, that's speculative on my part. However, given the available evidence, that is a plausible scenario. We can clearly say, based on radar data, which are empirical, not anecdotal, that these objects have been tracked since the early 1950s, if not earlier, traveling up to 7,000 miles per hour, making right-angle turns at high rates of speed, instantaneously hovering, reversing course. If we or the Russians or any country on Earth had those kinds of craft in the early 50s, why have we spent the last several decades developing fixed-wing aircraft of far inferior abilities? These are clearly, in my view, a technology from somewhere else piloted by beings from obviously another world or another dimension. Moreover, the fact that missiles have been tampered with here and in the former Soviet Union, and on one occasion in each country, about which I am aware, actually activated, I think we can rule out that these are the Americans attempting to start World War III or the Russians attempting to start World War III. Again, the technology involved is so superior, and we cannot conceive of a logical scenario whereby either of our countries would attempt to activate nuclear missiles for any reason under the sun. Now, our opinion is that whoever these beings are, they are indeed attempting to send a signal that we are playing with fire, that we are gambling with the human race's future. There are other possible scenarios. I have half-jokingly said from time to time, maybe they're planning to invade Earth and they don't want to inherit a radioactive environment when they do. Now, I don't believe that's what's going on by any means. I don't think humankind is in jeopardy from whoever they are and what their intentions are, except we will have our minds expanded. There will be a paradigm shift. Traditional institutions such as religions, governments, other social institutions may indeed be threatened by what is coming. That is just a logical consequence of what is about to occur. But if indeed this Earth is being visited by other races, and if those races are, one or more races, are in fact repeatedly monitoring and sometimes tampering with our nuclear weapons, that secret, in our view, should not be kept from the citizens of this planet any longer.
But you don't think there's an offensive element to their contact?
I don't think there's any potential hostility, except, again, to closed-minded people. Sure.
This is to the question of hostility. What you've heard up here, and especially in my case, they could have done a lot more damage, permanent damage to our weapon systems, and they didn't. All of these weapons, in my case, were brought back up on alert. It took a day or so, but everything was fine. If they wanted to destroy them with all the powers they seem to have, I think they could have done that job. So I personally don't think this was a hostile intent.
Hi, I'm Charles Stone with the Tiger News Service. I didn't ask my friend to come up and make that statement for me, but appreciate your patience. I've published internationally in the history of weapons of mass destruction, including going back to the 1940s, and these incidents go back to at least that period of time, that U.S. government military facilities that were doing high-tech development in that period of time also reportedly at least had UFO visitors of various types, and that there is archaeological evidence that there have been what we would call that there's evidence of what was almost certainly atomic warfare in ancient history, at least twice, and also that I'd like to mention that one of our biggest and most powerful government agencies was founded in part to monitor UFO activities. That was the National Security Agency in the late 1940s.
Did you have a question, sir?
Are you aware that the NSA was partially founded to monitor UFOs?
I've heard rumors to that effect, and also the Central Intelligence Agency. In my view, those rumors aren't supported by any authoritative documentation at this point. I would not be surprised at the same time if that were ultimately proved true by historians, but that's as far as I think we can take it at this point.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Kelly. I'm a columnist at the Washington Post. Colonel Halt, you mentioned that when you went out you had a cassette recorder, a Geiger counter. You said a camera?
Camera, 35 millimeter camera.
First of all, did you take any photographs? And second, how does a cassette tape made by you, presumably for official purposes, end up at a cocktail party entertaining guests?
Okay, two questions. Let me answer the first one. The disaster preparedness individual that I took along, Tech Sergeant Monroe Nevels, also worked for the base newspaper part-time. He was a professional photographer on the side, had a degree in photography, had his own darkroom. In fact, when he left the base, we had serious problems because he painted one of his rooms with flat black paint. We had to redo the paint about 4 or 5 times. He took numerous pictures of the indentations, pictures of the broken branches. He tried to take pictures of the objects in the sky. He took the film back home, and it all came out fogged. Unfortunately. Now, he did it in his own darkroom. I used to have a darkroom and dabble in photography, too. He could have done it himself. It could have been a radiation, which I have doubts about, or something could have happened that we don't know about. But anyhow, the film all came out fogged. Sergeant Pennison had a camera. It was not uncommon for the security police on the perimeter to carry cameras because the British have a lot of, we call them bird watchers, people that catch tail numbers and follow the history of airplanes and climb over the fence from time to time, not to do any damage or any harm, but curiosity and try and get close. It's part of a game. So we would, if they did that, we would photograph them inside the fence and turn them over to the British police. Sergeant Pennison took his film to the photo lab and turned it in, and they told him it disappeared. I can't answer that. The other question, what was the other question you asked about the...
So did you personally have a camera that were taking pictures?
I did not. I had the microcassette recorder. We, keep in mind, we were just in the process of transitioning to word processors in those days, still using the typewriter. Our secretaries were very resistant to getting involved in modern technology. And so what I would do, I carried one in my pocket, a little linear, and we had the big linear machine in the office, and when I went around the base, I'd note, you know, the fence is damaged here, this needs to be painted, whatever was going on. And I'd come back and give her the tape, and she'd type it up for the staff meeting the following week. So I just thought, well, I'll take the tape recorder along because I don't want to take notes. It's cold and windy, dark. So I took my tape recorder along. It was a little microcassette one, little tiny ones. I still have it, by the way. I came back, and after the tape was played at 3rd Air Force, and I played it for Squadron Leader Moreland and several other people, Ted Conrad, my boss, said, make me a copy. So I made him a copy. He put it in the desk drawer, in his desk drawer. He moved on and was replaced. And the gentleman that replaced him thought it was hilarious to play the tape. I didn't know this at the time at cocktail parties. So he was playing a copy. A copy of that copy somehow or other got to a gentleman by the name of Harry Harris, a British barrister or a lawyer. Harry was an amateur ufologist. He and a guy by the name of Mike Sachs. I traced this down years later. And a couple of ladies named Brenda Butler, Dot Street, and Jenny Randalls, who were writing a book at that time, all got involved, and my tape got out into the public domain, a copy of my tape. What's on the internet now is probably a 5th, 6th, or 7th generation, but it's out there. So does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Let me interject that Robert Jameson, the missile targeting officer from Malmstrom in 67, does need to catch a plane, and so if anyone wants to direct a question to him, you'll need to do it in the near term here.
Hi, Ledge King with Gannett, Washington Bureau. I have 3 questions, 2 of which can be answered by raising a hand. The first is, have any of you been contacted in the last month, I guess, whenever this event was being planned, by a government official telling you not to show up or trying to dissuade you? Any of them? Any of you? No. Second question is, Mr. Hastings alludes to the fact that there's a message being sent here that we ought to get rid of nukes. How many of you subscribe to that theory? The theory that you support getting rid of nukes, first of all.
I don't think he said that.
Well, that...
What you're being asked is, Bob and I are of the opinion that the bottom line is the best explanation for what has taken place at our nuclear weapon sites is that whoever are in the UFOs are in effect sending a message, perhaps getting rid of nukes, expressing displeasure or concern, but certainly indicating an interference with the weapons. You're being asked whether you subscribe to that or not.
Do you support...
Not quite to that degree. I think they're modernists. Make sure we don't mess things up.
Do all of you support getting rid of nuclear weapons? Show of hands. One. Okay.
Can I just add?
Sure.
With regard to the reason I came to the conclusion that this was a message, simply, again, they could have done a lot more destruction, I think, to our weapon systems, and they didn't. It was simply shining a light on our nuclear weapons, and literally shining a light on nuclear facilities. This has happened all over the world. I can point to other instances where UFOs came over, shone a beam down on the weapons storage area where nukes were stored. To me, it's pretty clear. This is just, we're shining a light on this. We're pointing it out. What are you people doing with nuclear weapons?
And my final question, which does require somebody to speak, is, you've talked about how society and the mainstream media sort of are very dismissive of all this. Can one or two of you talk about sort of the personal journey you've come to in terms of, approaching family or friends or others about this when people may think it's kooky to talk about this? Can one or two of you talk about how was it difficult? How difficult was it? That sort of thing. Thank you.
Well, as a person who is very, very skeptical about this, what I call UFO nonsense, when that happened that night and I thought through the process of what the logical explanations are, after that I was very careful about who I told what, because some of my friends, when I started on this, just laughed. So I got ridiculed. I was used to the ridicule from the Air Force, except for the dual standard. We're going to ridicule, but it's secret and don't talk about. And coming out was my... I came out a little bit. I talked to Robert. I gave him a little bit of the story. I didn't want my name to come out. I was concerned. I don't want to be considered a kook. I don't want to, because I consider, not so many anymore, but I consider some of the extremists a bit kooky. But I think it's more important that we come out and tell our story rationally and see that we aren't kooks, and this is what happened, and make your own judgment. But one of my concerns is that you all think I'm a kook, and I'm old enough that I don't really care that much because it happened. So is that okay?
How old are you?
68. Going on 95.
I would briefly add to that I made a decision decades ago that no matter who laughed at me or threw things at me, I would speak what I knew to be the facts. The world is filled with self-appointed UFO experts, persons who have all the answers, even though they've studied none of the facts. The scientific community is chock full of those folks. Journalism, frankly, is chock full of those folks. We're presenting credible witnesses for open minds, people who have an objective sense of their duty to inform the American public about the reality of the situation. We're providing you not only these witnesses, but many other witnesses who can testify as to the reality of all of this, and you may draw your own conclusions.
I'm Lisa Pham from Epoch Times newspaper. My question is towards Mr. Arneson. You mentioned someone over there trying to send us a message. I wonder what kind of a message. Do those aliens consider our Earth people have a threat to them, or they just try to defend, or they try to come here to occupy, take over Earth? What kind of message do you think?
If I knew that answer, I wouldn't be here. I really don't know. But they're trying to tell us something without a question. Whether it's don't go much further, you get rid of the things, I don't have any idea. Are they from the extraterrestrial? Who knows? Are they from other dimensions? Who knows? Are they from underneath the earth? Who knows? Your guess is as good as mine, and I can't answer that question. Anything else?
The government are trying to conceal this information, the fact actually, for all those years. Do you think this will do good for the society's stability, or is it kind of prevent for some advance or further research for our society?
No, that's a big one. We have been lied to for so many decades about the truth of the matter, and I think we need to have more openness in society as far as what these things are. Recently, in the last year or two, the Catholic Church has said publicly, you know, hey, it's okay. ETs can exist. They're our brothers, and they are theologically saying it's okay to believe in extraterrestrials. And if the Catholic Church says it, it's got to have a big stick, I would think, as far as the Western world is concerned anyhow.
Do you think right now it's a time for human beings to admit there are other spiritual beings in the universe besides the human race?
Oh yeah, I think that's the thing is, people are so wrapped up nowadays in their own world. They're worried about jobs, they're worried about mortgages. They could care less about UFOs and ETs and paranormal events and whatnot. That isn't even on their radar scope. Unfortunately, that's... I understand that. I haven't spoken to college students that much myself, but I understand that that is a fact. Yeah. And that's healthy. I think that's goodness. Oh, yeah. I just wonder what's in the archives in the Vatican as far as UFOs and things like that are concerned. If that could be released, wow, I bet it would blow the socks off a lot of people. That'd be interesting.
Okay. You asked what would the potential changes be for society, would this be good? Let me briefly summarize and say, in 1975, a former CIA official, Victor Marchetti, wrote a best-selling book called The CIA and Cult of Intelligence. The CIA took him to the Supreme Court to attempt block publication of that book. Ultimately, a redacted version of it was released. It was the first book in American history to be censored by the U.S. government. The same Victor Marchetti, in 1979, wrote an article for Second Look magazine. The title, I believe, was How the CIA Views the UFO Phenomenon. He said, among other things, this subject was so sensitive that you did not talk about it in the agency unless you had a need to. Nevertheless, there were rumors floating around at the highest levels of CIA about recovered crashed UFOs and the bodies of their crews. Thirdly, Victor Marchetti said, in his opinion, as an intelligence analyst with CIA for I think 11 years, he was of the opinion that no government on earth will voluntarily release this information because it would jeopardize the status quo, i.e. their power. Even if there's no hostile intent or implication to the visitation of these beings, if indeed these are extraterrestrials, even if they're not meaning us any harm whatsoever, governments have nothing to gain and everything to lose by admitting the reality of this. And Victor Marchetti's opinion is that this will probably come out, by some action on the part of the phenomenon itself, which will leave no doubt in anyone's mind. But don't expect Washington or Moscow or any other government to volunteer the reality of all of this.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Canan. I'm a defense writer of long standing in this town for Gannett Newspaper's Business Week magazine, and I was senior editor of Air Force magazine. I'm going to ask a question, but I want to contribute something. When I was on Air Force Magazine, I was told by an Air Force colonel of long acquaintance that this was real and that we were actually dealing with the aliens. I never had the guts to write. He said, you won't have the guts to write this. I said, no, because I have to confirm it. And if you can't tell me how to confirm it, he did give me a couple names, but it didn't pan out. I was like all the rest of the press, you know, if I couldn't confirm it, I wouldn't write it. Now, that may mean that we're somewhat cowardly, but at the same time, it means that we're also very careful. I do sympathize with the members of the press who do not write about this, even though I myself am convinced of it by now, because I was one of them once. But now, I have a question contemporary. 2 years ago, the Air Force Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force were dismissed by the Secretary of Defense for, among other reasons, being sloppy in their management of nuclear weapons. We transported an armed one somewhere, we sent components overseas and so forth. This shook up the Air Force. I want to ask you gentlemen, in the aggregate or individually, do you think that this evidence of malfeasance ranks up there with not telling the public about alien or UFO intrusion at nuclear sites? Is there an equation there?
I don't know about ranking, but it points out the dangers of nuclear weapons. The fact that these accidents have occurred, serious accidents with nuclear weapons, and it just points out how dangerous it is that we have them. I don't know how to compare that with the cover-up. I'd have done an analysis of the cover-up, and I'd be glad to give it to any of you guys that are interested. But I think it's related in the fact that the cover-up of the fact that the UFOs did intercede with our nuclear weapons is extremely important.
May I add something? This Air Force colonel who talked to me about all this, he did so in result of my questioning about it after a Japan Airlines freighter over Alaska was trailed by a UFO in 1987. I called all over Elmendorf, FAA, the Pentagon. And then I was approached by this colonel whom I had known, who said, I understand you are interested in UFOs. And I said, yeah, you know, well, I have something to tell you. And since he had known me a long time, that's why he got into this. It had no great enterprise on my part, and I still don't know what to believe. But would you comment on, he also said, though, that we have a lot of misconceptions about what they are here for. He said they basically don't give a damn. They don't care what we do. They're here for their own purposes. And that any notion that they should land and say, take us to your leader, boggles the imagination because they don't care about that kind of thing. And I said, well, do you have any idea why they are here? He said, no. And he didn't think anybody else in the Air Force or anywhere else did either. How does that square?
Let me interject regarding the November 87 radar tracking incident that you alluded to.
Right, and
in recent years, you may know that the number 5 guy in the echelon at FAA, John Callahan, has gone public and said that shortly after that happened, CIA agent, 2 agents, I believe, and some other government types convened a meeting at FAA headquarters and said we want all the radar tapes, all the voice tapes, and this never happened. I wasn't here. John Callahan said, how come we can't tell the people about this? According to this FAA administrator, the CIA agent said the people would panic, the public would panic. John Callahan, to his immense credit, kept some of the data down in his office. The CIA agent said, give me all of this. He gave him everything that was on the table, didn't tell him about what was downstairs. And when he left the agency, John Callahan released that to the public. So CIA is still quite involved in all of this.
Leslie Kane's great book includes that again.
I think regarding well, to follow up on the other part of your question about, what are they up to, why are they here, and so on, no one knows. Maybe the people at the CIA and the Pentagon and the Kremlin don't even know. However, these very simplistic scenarios of if they're real and they're here, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Well, if they're anthropologists and this is a classroom experiment, you don't interject yourself into the experiment, you observe. Or an alternate scenario, if this backwards planet is on the verge of a nuclear holocaust, maybe on a limited basis you intervene in a way that the Pentagon knows what's going on, the Kremlin knows what's going on, except for troublemakers like us, the public at large in neither country does not know what's going on. So in effect, you send a signal, in my opinion, to governments about nuclear weapons without alarming the general populace. The late Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was a UFO skeptic, he worked for Project Blue Book. For so many years, he eventually believed, I've been wrong, science has been wrong, these are real, and we should check into it. When asked why, the aliens, if that's who they are, do not visit us, he said, a zoo is a nice place to visit, but you don't communicate with the lizards. So, there's any number of plausible scenarios to explain why we have not had open contact. I am of the opinion that whoever they are have enough sense to know that if they interject themselves into our reality in one fell swoop, there could be very dire repercussions. Whereas, on the other hand, if they engage in an on-again, off-again cat-and-mouse behavior that allows a slow psychological conditioning of humankind to the reality and the presence of themselves, then when open contact, if that indeed is in the cards, occurs, there will be far less trauma.
Thank you. I wasn't meaning to contest your point of view, by the way, merely pointing out what I had heard.
It's all right.
Michael Rank from Lancaster County. Al and I came down this afternoon, and we were talking about the fact that we are now able to combine human and non-human genetic materials by our medical sciences. And I don't know whether any of you have had a chance to read Professor Jacobs' book, The Threat. He's a tenured professor at Temple University, and he has been doing regression therapy with abductees for years, and he has quite a body of knowledge there. One of my reasons for asking this is, being an old district attorney, the definition of murder is the unlawful killing of another human being, but nowhere does it say, does it have to be 100% human? Can it be 1% human? I'm waiting for somebody to play that card. I'm out of the business now, but that might be fun. The other issue is the toadies in government who are following their orders to lose the files in Freedom of Information Acts, I think might take a totally different view as to their attempt to preserve their jobs if they realize that there might be an argument made that there's a First Amendment violation by suppressing the truth about these things that have been found and seen and so forth. The suppression works to favor certain religions versus other religions. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you for coming. Again, all of us will be available for one-on-one interviews for some period of time. Thank you.